Hi class. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 5. Now Chapter 5 discusses three major themes that changed women's lives and the course of American history in the early to mid 19th century. These themes are Western expansion, reform movements, especially those led by women, and the Civil War. Within Western expansion, we see a new challenge to the idea of true womanhood. Most of the women who moved west with their families were white middle-class women, exactly the people who had been championing the ideas of true womanhood when they lived back east. As they move west, it becomes much more difficult to stick to the same ideas about what women are supposed to do and supposed to be, as everything about their lives is changed. And women tend to react to this in one of two ways. Many of them clung even harder to the ideas of what women should do and should be. And we see this especially in the division of labor on the Oregon Trail, how those are very gendered. Women are attempting to keep house within their little wagons. And so they are basically trying to adapt their idea of a normal life to a new reality. Also, in areas like California during the gold rush, we see women who realize that the changes in gender proportions, basically the fact that there are a lot more men than women, give them opportunities that were not available to them in other places. And so these women still do jobs that are fairly gendered, such as doing laundry or cooking, but they are far more independent, if they want to be, than their counterparts back east. They use this as an opportunity to bring in a much larger income than they would have in the east, and to be more independent overall. The second major theme of this chapter is reform movements, especially those that women are involved in the early 19th century. We see a shift here where women are becoming more and more involved outside the home in different types of social change. And a lot of these still focus on ideas of what women should be concerned about versus what they shouldn't be concerned about. The abolition of alcohol is a very good example of this. Women want to ban alcohol because they are trying to nurture their community and improve it in this particular way. The abolition of slavery is more religiously focused, but it's still women trying to take care of their communities and of their country. From these movements, the women's rights movement is born. So, especially within the abolition movement, women were extremely active. In fact, they formed a majority of the participants for most of the history of the movement. But men were given positions of importance. And so women started to wonder why that needed to be the case. As the abolition movement became more focused on actually achieving things through politics, women started to feel the lack of the vote and become more concerned with achieving the vote for themselves in addition to achieving economic rights like the right for a married woman to own property. So the women's rights movement is born from women trying to fix their communities in a variety of different ways and realizing that if society allows women to be equal participants, it will be much easier for them to achieve those goals. Chapter 5 closes with a discussion on the Civil War, and I'd like to go into a little more detail on the causes of the Civil War because I think it's very important and I feel like the book skimmed over it a little bit. In the early 19th century, the United States was expanding westward, and one of the major political questions related to this expansion was whether or not slavery should be allowed in the new territories. Southerners who owned slaves were instrumental in many of the fights to expand westward, especially in the war with Mexico in the 1840s. And they believed that they had a right to settle with their slaves just as anyone else who fought in the war could. At the same time, a lot of Northerners wanted to keep that area free of the influences of slavery and free of slave labor, especially those lower income people who would have been in competition with slave labor for jobs. So the major political question that brought slavery about was not whether or not they should end slavery altogether, but whether slavery should be allowed to expand westward. Abraham Lincoln himself was violently opposed to the idea of slavery's expansion, but the concept of slavery itself wasn't something that particularly troubled him. When he was elected president as an anti-expansion of slavery candidate, the South felt like slavery was really under attack. So they believed that not only would Lincoln try to prevent the expansion of slavery, which Southerners favored, but that he would try to eliminate the institution altogether, and this was not something they wanted to see happen. That's why the South seceded. In the first 2 years of the Civil War, the North's goal was to stop the South from forming its own country and to bring it back into the fold. And it's not until January 1st, 1863, when Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation, that the war really does become about slavery for the North. The Northerners at first just wanted to keep the country together, but now they are fighting to free the slaves, and they also, through the Emancipation Proclamation, allow African Americans to serve in the U.S. Army so that they can assist with the fight to end slavery overall. So it's really important to keep in mind the South thought that this was about states' rights and about protecting the institution of slavery, and the North wanted to protect the Union, the combination of all the states into the United States. With the Civil War, there are a lot of really inspirational women involved, and I hope that you will take a look at the visual sources section at the end of the chapter, which describes nurses on both sides of the war and female soldiers who disguise themselves as men. I hope you enjoy this chapter, and I look forward to reading your discussion comments. Thanks, and have a great day.